Span and div tags in HTML. Let's go ahead and play around with those. Add a new file and call it span-div.html. Open that up in your code editor. Obviously, add that basic structure, and let's get this party started. Span and ampersand div tags. Okay, so span and div tags. Well, let me just tell you something here. As you know, HTML is reserved for the meaning of your web page. So hopefully it makes sense. I've been trying to drive that fact home for the past number of lectures. Meaning is simply what the web page's content means, the semantic value, the tags, the structure of how you write your document. So you have headings, you have paragraphs, there are other tags called article tags. So the browser knows that this is an article. Let me just write these out. You got your level 1 heading. So we know that's a heading. We know this is a paragraph. We know that this is an article. We know that there's another tag called the footer. That's an HTML5 tag. We know that there's a header, another HTML5 tag. So this gives meaning and value to the document. The browser knows, hey, I'm looking at a heading. I'm looking at a paragraph. I'm looking at an article. I'm looking at a footer and a header, so on and so forth. And on the front end, you can even see that the content has the meaning. So you see the heading, and that looks like a heading. It makes sense. You have a paragraph. You might have an article. So you have literally a blog post that's wrapped in an article tag. A footer could be at the bottom of your website or the footer of a blog post with footer information like the author and the date posted, and so on and so forth. So that has semantic value and meaning. But there are these funny tags in HTML called span and div. And in all honesty, they are actually called meaningless tags. They have no meaning whatsoever, standalone. They don't mean anything. What is a div? What is a span? What does this even mean? There is no meaning. As a human, I don't understand what these mean. I can't see a human readable thing. It's not a footer. It's not an article. It's not an aside. It's not time. What is it? It's just div and span. And the same thing, the browser doesn't know what these mean. There is no meaning. You're not adding any semantic value to your document. But funny enough, these tags are probably the most commonly used tags on any website and every website. You'll see them everywhere, divs and spans. Why? Well, because they do add value to your content in a way when you start adding your IDs and your classes. Because what you can do with divs and spans are wrap content and use them as a container of content. So let me just give you an example. We can have something like your level 1 heading and say Brad's website. And then this could be welcome to the site. Please take your time and learn something. And then we can have, I don't know, let's say an unordered list with a couple items here like home, about, and blog. And you'd put links around those to your different pages, but I won't do that right now. And so you'd have something like this. And you wouldn't look like anything special. It'd simply look like this. But if you wanted in CSS to select that whole section, what would you do? What if you wanted that entire section, the level 2 heading, the paragraph tag, and the unordered list? What if you wanted all of those to have a gray background or something like that? Or you wanted it to be centered. You wanted that whole section to have a specific style, a background image or something, a different font. How do you do that? Do you select every single individual element like H2, P, unordered list, and style them all the same? Well, you can, but you're limited to styling these elements individually, not as a whole. What if you wanted to group them all together? Well, this is where the div tag comes in. Watch this. I can now wrap the entire content in a div tag. So now all of this, you can even see in the browser here, is wrapped. This is the div. It's a block level element and it's wrapping all of that content. So now it is all related to each other. It has a parent a common parent, which is the div tag. But still, the div has no meaning unless you add extra information. And this is where your IDs and your classes come in handy. So I can give this the ID of something like header dash content, and now this div technically has meaning. While the browser doesn't read this and doesn't know, this could literally be gibberish, but we know that this is header content. The reader won't know. However, when you're using your CSS, and I keep hinting towards CSS, you'll realize how powerful it is once we get to it. You can select the ID of header content and style this entire container. You could style it with whatever you want, anything you want. It could be a background, it could be a background image, it could change the font, you could change the position on the browser, you could change the elements within it, you can center the content, you can make it large font size, you can do anything because now this is related. All of this is wrapped in one big container. Think of this like a bucket, and it's contained all of this content. Now, what about the span tag? The span is also a funny one. The biggest difference between a div and a span is that a div is a block level element and a span is an inline element, meaning there's no breaking, there's no line break after the element. It sits within the content and doesn't have a width. It is the width of however large the content is within it. Whereas a block element takes the entire width and has a line break after the element. So where would you use a span tag? Well, you could use it somewhere like this. Let's just say I wanted to add a span tag in here and say, please take your time. And that's a span tag wrapping this content. Now, why would you do this? What's the point? Well, if you wanted to style a specific element or specific text within your content, you can add a span tag and give it another ID, or you can give it a class. Maybe there's multiple span tags that you want the same style. So let's just say blue text, or maybe not. Maybe let's call it something like important. There we go. And then we want to add another span tag over here and give this the exact same class and say class important. So now we have two spans of the class of important. So in CSS, we will select elements, any element with the class of important, and give it a style like red or bold or something. You know what I mean? That's kind of the point of a span tag. You can use a span tag like so and have content within it. However, it's not really advisable because block level elements are better for that sort of thing, and you could nest your span tags within your div tags. Divs are usually better elements for wrapping a whole bunch of content, whereas spans you'd use kind of in this sort of scenario where you're trying to wrap smaller bits of text or elements or something like that. So that's kind of how spans and divs work. Divs are block level elements, spans are inline level elements, and they're meaningless tags. But when you use them as wrappers and you give them IDs or classes, they can be extremely powerful, especially when you start using CSS.